You will die many times before your body ever touches a grave. And the first death, the one most men run from, is the death of who they think they are. That version of you built from fear, from memories you didn't choose, from the survival patterns passed down like family heirlooms. He's standing in your way, not as an enemy, but as a gatekeeper. Success. Is not a climb. It's a release. A surrender to something far greater than effort alone can touch. But here's what they won't tell you in the motivational speeches and mourning. Grind montages. The real breakthrough comes after you lose, after your pride fractured, after you've outgrown the armor that once protected you. There's no metamorphosis without the decay of the caterpillar, no phoenix without fire, no resurrection without a tomb. And yet, most men never make it. Because dying to who you were feels like betrayal. You've been taught to push, to dominate, to force. But what if the true key was letting go? What if the highest form of strength is not found in holding on, but in surrendering to the version of you that already exists, buried beneath the noise? This is not about giving up. This is about giving in to destiny, to obedience, to the code. Napoleon Hill knew this, but it was never in his headlines. It was buried quietly in the margins of his life's work. The hidden success code wasn't achievement. It was transcendence. The ability to die to the ego so the soul could lead. You've been chasing success, but success has been waiting for your death. The death of the false you, the one who doubts, the one who clings, the one who controls. He must go, because the code will not unlock until you surrender. Perfect. We now enter the first descent, the unraveling of the false self. It must feel like a quiet collapse, a moment of undeniable recognition. We will now begin. Look closely at your life, not the surface, not the routines. Look at the patterns, the way you rise and fall, the way you start and stall. The same income ceiling, the same relationships in new bodies, the same emotional cycles wrapped in different justifications. It's not luck, it's not fate, it's not just how life is, it's identity. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your default self. And most people are living inside an unconscious contract with an outdated identity. This is the prison, not made of bars, but of beliefs, not guarded by officers, but by your own loyalty to who you used to be. Read that again. You are loyal to the old you, even if he's hurting you, even if he's keeping you small. Why? Because he's familiar. Because he kept you safe once. Because he's the version that got you through the trauma, the loss, the abandonment, the struggle. But survival is not destiny, and the tools that once kept you alive are now keeping you from truly living. You keep rebuilding the same version of your life, not because you're lazy, but because you're still using the blueprint of a person who was never designed to go beyond survival. And every time you try to evolve, something pulls you back, not because of fate, but because that old you is still in control of the blueprint. He chooses the goals. He reacts to the world. He chooses the people. He interprets the opportunities. He runs the show silently in the background of your mind. And until he dies, nothing changes. This is why new habits don't stick. This is why success feels temporary. This is why transformation seems impossible, because the builder has not changed. The subconscious mind is the soil. Your identity is the root. Your life is the fruit. Trying to change your results without changing your root identity is like repainting the leaves of a dying tree. Napoleon Hill wrote, "You may be the seed if you trust too much, but you will live in torment if you don't trust enough." That trust ... begins with you, but not the you in the mirror. The you behind the mirror, the architect, the silent builder who has been scripting your limitations for years. To surrender to success, you must first stop trusting the old builder. And that's terrifying, because if you don't follow his instructions, who will you be? Here's the truth most will never face. You are not afraid of failure. You are afraid of the death of your identity. Because in your mind, letting go of that identity feels like self-betrayal. It feels like abandoning a version of you that got you this far. But you are not here to honor your past. You are here to transcend it. You are not here to keep rebuilding the same castle with slightly shinier stones. You are here to burn it down and build the temple that was always meant to rise. Surrender begins with this truth. The version of you that's trying to win was never designed to. He's not your future. He's your weight. And as long as you remain loyal to him, you will keep choosing lives that match his limitation. Different jobs, same feeling. Different cities, same fear. Different partners, same pattern. It's not punishment. It's reflection. Life will mirror back the version of you are still serving. So if you keep trapped in the same cycles, ask yourself, who am I still being loyal to? The child who was ignored? The teenager who had to prove himself? The version of you that only knew how to win by being perfect, loud, or invisible? Who's really choosing your life right now? Because until you face him, he runs everything. This is why most people never evolve. Not because they lack tools, but because they lack funerals. They are trying to build the future without burying the past. But the code does not unlock until there is a death, not a physical one, an identity death, a conscious release, a sacred moment where you no longer pretend that the one who brought you here is the one who can take you there. You must walk back into the burning house and thank the man who built it, then leave. This is the beginning of power, not in addition, but in subtraction. Not in adding more affirmations, strategies, or routines, but in removing the lie you've built your life around. That you have to stay the same to be safe. That growth must look like struggle. That you can't trust the unknown. But in truth, the only danger is staying loyal to a self you've already outgrown. Let the old you die. Let the patterns collapse. Let the familiar burn. Only then will the foundation be ready for who you were always becoming. Excellent. We now cross into the second chamber of transformation, resistance, the ego's final defense. We begin. The moment you begin to rise, something inside you will try to pull you back. It won't be loud. It won't look like fear. It will sound reasonable. It will feel like logic. It will come dressed as fatigue, distraction, even success. This is resistance, the ego's final stand. It's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect itself. Because the ego was never built for evolution. It was built for recognition. It feeds on what is known, titles, routines, opinions, expectations. And when you move beyond what it understands, it panics. So it resists. It creates urgency around unimportant things. It starts arguments in your relationships. It convinces you that you're tired, that you need a break, that this next step isn't the right time. But behind it all, it's not fear of failure. It's fear of death. Because when you shift your identity, the ego, as it has existed, dies, and it doesn't go quietly. It fights with memory. It fights with guilt. It fights with your old definitions of success. It says, who will you be if you stop chasing validation? Who are you without the hustle? If you let go of control, won't everything fall apart? This is the battlefield most never recognize because it's internal. It's not a war of effort. It's a war of attachment. You are not just changing habits. You are letting go of the very self that those habits were built to maintain. This is why change is so hard. Because beneath every new goal is a buried identity that feels threatened by it. You say you want wealth, but your old self fears the judgment of success. You say you want freedom, but your ego equates stillness with danger. You say you want love, but a part of you was built to expect abandonment. So you resist. Not because you don't want more, but because more threatens who you've been. That resistance is not weakness. It's evidence. Evidence that the old self is beginning to lose power. This is where most quit. Not because they lack desire, but because they misinterpret the storm. They think resistance means something is wrong, when in fact, resistance means something is leaving. The closer you get to alignment, the louder the ego will scream. Because alignment requires surrender. And the ego cannot survive surrender. That's why it will seduce you with urgency, with pride, with the illusion of next week. It will replay old failure. It will exaggerate risk. It will whisper lies with your own voice. But here's the truth. The ego is loudest right before it dies. It's like a candle flaring before it extinguishes. One last surge of heat. One last plea for you to turn back, to shrink, to hide, to delay. Not because it's evil, but because it's afraid. And fear disguised as logic is one of the most dangerous voices you'll ever face. But here's the shift. You don't fight the ego. You observe it. You become the witness. You see the storm. And stay still. You let it thrash. You let it speak. You let it throw every reason at you. And then you walk forward anyway. This is not about violence. This is about authority. You don't destroy the ego. You dethrone it. You no longer let it drive. You acknowledge its fear, but you don't feed it. This is what Napoleon Hill discovered in his quietest moments, not in the public pages of Think and Grow Rich, but in the shadow whispers of Outwitting the Devil. He wrote, "Fear is the tool of a man-made devil. It paralyzes reason, kills self-reliance, and undermines enthusiasm." But he also said that the strongest weapon against fear is the power of decision. The moment you decide to no longer listen to the old voice is the moment resistance begins to lose its grip. The ego does not vanish overnight, but it does weaken when you stop negotiating with it. And the more you move in alignment with who you're becoming, the more the voice fades, until one day it's silent, and you realize the storm was never meant to stop you. It was meant to test you, not to prove how strong you are, but to show you how ready you've always been. Powerful. Let's continue. We've exposed the prison of identity. We've witnessed the ego's resistance and desperate last stand. Now we cross into the paradox that sets the entire code free. Surrender is not weakness. It is mastery beyond the mind's understanding. It is the unlocking moment where the warrior finally lays down the sword and becomes the king. Let us begin. They told you surrender meant defeat, that letting go meant you quit, that softness was, that power only comes through force. But that was never truth. That was ego, wearing the mask of discipline. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't shout to be seen. It doesn't need to control outcomes, people, or timing. Real power is silent, still, certain, unmoved. It doesn't fight for the throne. It becomes the throne. And here's the paradox. The highest version of you cannot arrive until the one trying to become him surrenders, because the you trying to change is still driven by fear. Fear of being nobody, fear of falling behind, fear of not being enough. That fear wears a disciplined face. It looks like hustle. It looks like ambition. But underneath is desperation. You don't need more force. You need less friction. You don't need more hours. You need more alignment. Surrender is the act of releasing control. Not because you don't care, but because you finally trust the path that's pulling you. And that takes more courage than domination ever will. Because anyone can fight. But to let go? To let something die that you once built your identity on. That is power. It's not apathy. It's awakening. It's the knowing that your destiny is not something you chase. It's something you allow. Once you stop resisting who you really are. Imagine this. You are swimming in a river. You've been paddling upstream for years. Exhausted. Determined. Proud. You're doing the work. You're outworking the competition. But the entire time, you've been resisting the current of your own becoming. And one day you let go. You stop fighting. You float. You trust. And suddenly, you move 10 times faster. Not because you tried harder, but because you aligned. That is surrender. It's the shift from effort to access. It's the moment you stop acting from fear and start receiving from flow. And no, this is not passive. This is not just think positive fluff. This is inner mastery, the kind that requires brutal self-honesty, the kind that strips away every illusion of control you ever clung to. It is the recognition that life doesn't bend to your force. It opens to your frequency. Surrender shifts your state, and your state creates your strategy. You don't have to make every door open. You have to become the version of you that those doors are already open to. Napoleon Hill hinted at this code, but the world only heard his first message, think and grow rich. But few ever noticed the deeper message. Be still and listen. There is power in silence. Ideas are born when the conscious mind is quiet. That quiet is surrender. And in that stillness, what emerges is not laziness, but clarity. A kind of knowing that makes the noise irrelevant. A kind of peace that surpasses effort. A kind of command that needs no audience. It is from this state that the great ones move, not through force, but through flow, obedience, and inner trust. The warrior eventually becomes the monk. The builder eventually becomes the seer, the one who once fought. Eventually becomes the one who no longer needs to. And ironically, that's when everything changes. Because life does not obey the desperate. It responds to the aligned. When you are no longer chasing, you become magnetic. When you no longer control, you become trusted by the invisible forces that shape destiny. Because now you are ready to carry power, not as an identity, but as a responsibility. ready to walk into rooms without needing to be seen, ready to take action without needing a result, ready to move forward, not because of pressure, but because of presence. This is the power no one can teach you. It can only be remembered in silence, in surrender, in stillness. When you find it, you don't need to prove anything ever again, because the version of you who once needed to be seen, validated, feared, or respected has died. And in his place stands something deeper, something timeless. The man who no longer fights himself cannot be stopped. Beautiful. Now we step into the revelation. This isn't just about success. It's about alignment with destiny. Let's enter, let go, and watch what happens. The code doesn't appear in the noise. It emerges when the noise no longer runs you, because the truth was never hidden. It was silenced by your attachment to being the one in control. You weren't missing the signs. You were just too busy trying to steer the storm. But the storm wasn't chaos. It was calling you to release, to trust, to step aside so the deeper intelligence, the one that built this universe, breathes your lungs and turns acorns in the forest, could finally take the lead. You thought you had to build the code, but the code was always inside you, waiting for the ego to step aside. This is the part they don't teach in business plans and success seminars. The quantum leap doesn't come from doing more. It comes from becoming less of who you are not. And when you finally surrender, the shift happens fast. The ideas drop in with clarity. The right people arrive unforced. The energy returns, not in adrenaline, but in peace. You stop chasing alignment because you become it. The old tension in your chest, gone. The mental loop of second guessing, silent. The fear of being behind, replaced with a strange, holy calm. And suddenly, you're no longer operating on memory, but on knowing. Not driven by fear, but guided by intuition. Not controlling time, but walking with it. The world hasn't changed. You have, because now the channel is clear. The code can finally move through you, uninterrupted. And here's what's wild. All the effort you used to burn in overthinking, doubting, micromanaging your life is now freed up. And that freed energy becomes vision, creativity, presence, access to a higher level of intelligence that logic alone could never touch. You start to feel it. The moment you let go, the inner scaffolding shifts. You begin to recognize yourself in a new way, not as a product of your past, but as a portal to something greater. This is when your life begins to self-correct. The wrong paths close gently. The forced friendships fade with grace. The weight you didn't even know you were carrying disappears, and in its place is clarity. Not a 5-year plan, but a present knowing. You don't need to map the whole staircase. You only need to walk the next step with truth. And here's the final paradox. The more you surrender, the more powerful your life becomes. Because now, you're no longer drawing from the mind of a single man. You're pulling from the blueprint of something infinite. The code is not linear. It is spiritual architect. It's not built by the one who wants to succeed. It is revealed to the one who becomes empty enough to receive it. And it's been waiting for you to stop pretending, to stop forcing, to return to the truth you've always carried. That you were never meant to create success. You were meant to reveal it. Like a sculptor chiseling away at marble, you do not build the masterpiece. You uncover it by removing what doesn't belong. Letting go is not passive. It is an active returning to who you've always been. It is the ultimate submission, not to the world, but to the frequency of your destiny. When you let go, the code speaks. When you obey, the path clears. When you listen, life begins to arrange itself around who you truly are. Not the version that was trying to win, but the one that came here to remember. Let's walk into the fire and out the other side. It's about initiation. Napoleon Hill was not just a thinker. He was a man initiated by invisible forces. He spoke of desire, faith, and persistence. But buried between the lines, deeper than the popular pages of Think and Grow Rich, was a truth most readers never caught. Success, in its highest form, is not created. It is obeyed. Because there comes a moment in every builder's life, every visionary, every warrior, every silent one, when they stop trying to manufacture their destiny and start surrendering to it. Hill called it infinite intelligence, the universal mind, a spiritual frequency beyond logic, beyond planning. He wrote, "There comes a moment in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance. That imitation is suicide." What is that suicide? It is the death of the false self, the obedient release of every borrowed desire, the burning of who you thought you had to become, so that the true assignment can emerge. And Hill learned this not from comfort, but from collapse. In Outwitting the Devil, he reveals that for over 20 years, he was held hostage, not by the world, but by fear itself. Not by failure, but by the inner resistance to obey the whisper he could feel, but didn't fully trust. That whisper was not telling him to hustle harder. It was telling him to yield, to write what was dangerous, to speak what would be rejected, to step outside of societal success and into spiritual command. This is the part no one teaches, because obedience doesn't make headlines, but obedience is where power lives. To obey the assignment on your life, even when it scares you, even when no one understands it, even when it doesn't match your brand or strategy, is to walk with a kind of power that shakes timelines. It requires depth of plans, of identities, of attachments, but it leads to rebirth, the only kind that matters. Because the version of you that tried to succeed by calculation and force will never enter the gates of legacy. Only the version that obeys, not to society, not to ego, but to the code that's been whispering inside you since the beginning. That code is not a list, it's a frequency. You don't follow it like steps, you match it like music. And the moment you surrender, the moment you give up control and drop into radical trust, that frequency begins to inform your entire reality. You don't need to know how. You only need to align. Because obedience is not passivity. It is the highest form of courage. To trust something you cannot fully see. To act without applause. To move without proof. To rebuild without the need to explain. This is the obedience Hill finally stepped into when he wrote Outwitting the Devil, a book he was too afraid to publish during his lifetime. Because it went against the safe narrative of success, but it was his true work, his initiation, his spiritual sword. And it came through him only after he surrendered to the voice that had been calling him for decades. He wrote, "Fear is the tool of a man-made devil. It is the destroyer of hope and faith. It kills ambition. It kills love. It kills every beautiful emotion." And yet, in the same breath, he revealed this. You are a mind with a body, not a body with a mind. You control your destiny only when you master your thoughts and obey your higher self. This is the hidden teaching, the unspoken code. You are not here to win by force. You are here to align by obedience. Because once obedience becomes your foundation, fear no longer holds the throne, resistance no longer writes the script, and the old self no longer owns the blueprint. You've crossed over from striving to becoming, from building to receiving, from control to command. This is what rebirth feels like. Not a motivational high, but a deep silence, a knowing, a grounded fire that no longer needs to explain itself. You have surrendered, and now you carry the code. Ready for the final transformation? We now arrive at the final rite, a letting go, a final silence, a moment the viewer has avoided for years and now must face. Here, we speak with the gravity of legacy, not with noise, not with hope, but with truth, the kind that echoes when the world goes quiet. Let's begin the farewell. There is one last thing you must do. You've listened, you've released, you've remembered, but now you must say goodbye, not to the world, not to your dreams, but to the version of you who carried you here and can go no further. He meant well. He fought hard. He protected you when no one else did. He made sure you survived the dark nights, the betrayals, the loneliness, the proving. But he is tired. And so are you. Because you were never meant to live from survival forever. You were meant to evolve, to rise, to return. But for that to happen, he must be buried. The ego you built to be loved. The mask you wore to be enough. The fear that became your planner. The pride that became your prison. They all stood in as guardians for a time. But guardians don't build empires. And you came here to build something eternal. So this is your moment. Not to hype, not to chant, but to stand still and let go. Close your eyes for a moment. Visualize him, the old self. See him clearly, not with judgment, but with reverence. This is the self who made decisions rooted in fear. The self who kept apologizing for existing. The self who confused performance with worth. The self who thought more hustle meant more value. Now, thank him for getting you through. Then look him in the eyes and say it. You are released, Because the future you is waiting, not somewhere far ahead, but right here, in the silence after surrender, in the breath that follows obedience, in the space that opens when you stop trying to be who you were. This is your turning, not with firework, but with a funeral, not with applause, but with alignment. Because the version of you that holds the code doesn't need attention, doesn't need control, doesn't need to explain his power. He is the power. And he emerges only when you stop performing, only when you stop proving, only when you bury the man who kept you safe, so the man who came to lead can rise. But he lived it. He died to public opinion. He surrendered to silence. And in that silence, he found a voice that changed the world. That voice is now echoing in you, not to follow the path, but to become it. You've mourned long enough. You've delayed long enough. You've doubted long enough. Now it's time to bury the man you no longer are and walk as the one you are always becoming. No more resistance, no more delay, no more rehearsing your breakthrough. This is the moment. The death has happened. The rebirth is complete. And the silence you feel now, that's not emptiness. That's power. That's the sound of alignment. That's the sound of the code clicking into place. Listen closely. It's yours now.